Well, it's time. So we'll go ahead and get this off. Welcome everyone to the Profitable Steward podcast and this webinar here tonight. We're grateful that Willy Twitchell from BYU Idaho is here with us and be able to share his expertise. I really look forward to the discussion that we're going to have here this afternoon. It's like Joel Salatin says, we need to romance the next generation into agriculture, because a lot of times we do the very opposite. The hard work, the long hours, the lack of profitability, the stress, those are the things that chase them away, and with good reason. If they see that the parent's life is stressful, why would they want a piece of that when they can go and literally in a lot of cases make more money and have less stress and do things that maybe are even more enjoyable. But it doesn't have to be that way, and that's what we're gonna talk about, how to do that. And I look forward to hearing it from the younger generation's perspective of what their needs are and how those needs maybe have changed from the time that I graduated from. Well, I didn't actually graduate from college, but I went to college and came back to the ranch, and that's been more than 30 years ago now, or almost 30 years ago. So it's going to be a great discussion. We welcome you here. You can always catch the replays on YouTube, on our YouTube channel, and then on the Profitable Steward podcast. So Willy, welcome. Glad you're able to join us today.
Thanks, Jared. Happy to be here.
Yeah, this is going to be a great discussion, and it looks like we've got a bit of an international audience here. Go ahead, those that are on live, if you haven't already, introduce yourself, tell us where you're from, and specifically if there's a reason that you showed up here, an intention for this class, share that in the chat. You can also ask questions there, and I'll interject those, and we'll have time for Q&A at the end. So Willy, tell us where you live. Well, maybe first of all, where you're from. I don't even know that. I know where you're at now, but where you're from, and then what you're doing currently.
Yeah. Well, thanks, Jared. Yeah, it's good to maybe a little background about me. And actually, I'm here where I'm from. I grew up in Rexburg, actually.
Okay.
And I've been able to stay here for a long time, other than times where I was gone. So we grew up. I grew up on a place that was actually homesteaded by my grandpa's dad, kind of a ranch farm, and so we grew up right here in Rexburg. I spent time working for other local ranchers, and I might bring that up throughout the discussion as we go along. And spent some time in Nebraska working, spent some time in Utah working on different ranches, and ended up back here. And so this is a great place. My wife is also from this area, so we've got both of our families close, and we have 5 kids. And they're great. We have 2 girls and 3 boys in that order, and
Okay.
so it's fun. So this is
Yeah.
where we ended up.
Yeah. What are the ages on your kids?
So my oldest daughter, she
Good.
just got married. She's 21. My next daughter's
Okay.
18. She's going to school here too. Both my daughters are. And then
Okay.
my oldest boy is 17. And then we got some twins that are getting ready to turn 15. So
Awesome. Well, very good.
yeah.
Well, cool. Well, let's jump right in. Let's talk about this up and coming generation, how we make an environment that allows them to thrive and prosper and solve the issue that we see, that there's a lot of people that are in that retiring generation, not only in agriculture, but in all businesses, and they don't have successors. They don't have somebody else who is willing, able to step up. And sometimes it's the younger generation, and I would say the older generation is equally at fault for not creating the place for them to thrive, not being willing to delegate. And I'm sure, Willy, you probably have seen it, and I see it all the time. There are individuals who are in their 60s or 70s, and the dad's still alive, and the 60s, 50, 60, 70-year-old can't make a strategic decision on the ranch because he's never been given the autonomy or the authority to make decisions. And that's sad. On the other extreme, my dad left on a mission when I was in my mid-20s, and I needed some oversight. Man, I didn't know what the heck I was doing. And so somewhere in the middle, there's got to be some balance between those two extremes, and that's what we hope we can find here throughout this discussion today.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm hoping so too, and I appreciate the invitation to come. When we talked about the topic, and you kind of threw out the title of growing the next generation of regenerative managers, and lots of thoughts came to my mind as you talked about that. Growing, developing kind of comes along. Regenerative, meaning this I don't know. Movement's always the right word to talk about it. It's just kind of returning to profitability, I think. I think that's something that you've talked about. You can't be regenerative if you're not profitable. You can't be sustainable if you're not profitable. And so looking at ag in a correct light. And I know we're not here to talk about the specifics of that. It's about these managers. And so I'm kind of trying to box in kind of my comments about the way that I'd like to frame this. And a lot of your audience are going to be people who, like you said, are current ranch managers. They're part of this community, and they're looking for people to maybe come and take over for what
Yep.
they're creating, or else working with them. So when we say that we're trying to grow the next managers, I think we can also put in that box owners and managers of the next generation. So either they're going to take over ownership of a ranch, or they're going to become a manager of a ranch, or a co-manager with multiple other ones. And so we've to set that frame. uh, we have a lot of the discussion that we'd usually have with people outside the industry about the landscape of the next generation of ranchers. We have an aging population, right? The average age of the ranchers, 58, 60-year-olds or older. We know in the next 20 years, 40% of the ranch land or the ag land is going to change hands and be transferred. And so the question is, who's that going to go to? And only about 23% of those ranch owners have a succession plan in place of saying this is exactly what's going to happen. So for the rest of that group, it's kind of unknown about what are we going to do, who's going to take over, how it's going to come. But I'd assume everybody that's in your audience already knows that because they're in the middle of it. And
Hmm.
they're like, yeah, we're not sure what to do. And so as I go through this, I want to give a little overview of some of my thoughts on this, and then we'll dive in with any questions. I thought about going into teacher mode and putting up a PowerPoint, and off we go. And then I didn't want to bring up any PTSD from former students or people that were in uh, college. And so I just wrote me down some notes for me to kind of follow and go along. But I invite, even in my classes, I always invite people to interrupt and let's wait, what do you mean by that? Let's talk about it. And I hope that some of these become good talking points. As you mentioned before, you kind of came across accusatory by saying some of the older generation, it's their fault. We don't have a younger generation coming up, by how maybe we acted or responded. And I hope that we kind of go around that and maybe try to understand why that's the case, and how do we move past that. So
Yep.
um, my invitation to those that are in a position to mentor this next generation, and that's the word that I'm going to use as we go along. That's how we're going to grow, and we're going to be able to mentor them. Is what is your role? And you might be looking at, I can mentor them through uh, they're employees of mine, or I can mentor them because they're my children that are part of this, or I can mentor them because maybe an organization or a group or the neighbors came and did a farm tour or a ranch tour and they saw me, or maybe you've been invited to talk to an ag group of young students from FFA or 4-H or something like that, or maybe even a stock growers association of older people came and toured your ranch. So you might look at yourself as being a mentor in that state. And I just kind of want to put this out there too, is to remember that anytime that we're in a position of a mentor, we have a ripple effect, whether it's good or bad. So the feelings that you send out there about our industry, about what it's like to be a part of the industry, or how we interact with each other, is going to be magnified through that ripple effect of, man, this is the way these people are, this is the way they approach problems, this is the way they solve problems, this is how they interact with me, and it's really good. And so then that becomes the message that's rippled out across the industry, or it's really bad, and that becomes a ripple. So with that in mind, before I jump into the groups that I think we need to cover, this idea of being a mentor is I think we need to define it. So a mentor is somebody who has experience, has earned your trust and who gives you advice, or somebody that you follow the advice of. And so if you're wanting to become a mentor to this rising next generation, I think it's really important that you analyze if you're all three of those things, right? Because if we're only one of those things or two of the things, we're a less effective mentor. So something to think about is obviously experience means you have a track record of doing the work and the things that are there. If you have trust, that means somebody respects you. You've created that through consistency or care, or you've shown interest in somebody. And then if you're giving advice, you are sharing that in a relevant way, in a timely fashion, and the advice that you share is going to be actionable, right? So these are things that a mentor has. So what if you're only a couple of those things, right? What if you're only you're very trustworthy and somebody, let me pause here a minute so you can kind of envision somebody in your life that's like this. So if if you're looking for a mentor, be thinking about those people that you've tried to seek information from and where do they fall in this. And if you're trying to become a mentor to this next generation, where would you fall in this? So if you are well trusted, or you know somebody that you trust and you have a lot of experience, or that person has a lot of experience, but they don't ever give you advice. This is what we'd call just a quiet observer. Like you know they're loaded with information, or even if you're loaded with information and you're a trustworthy person or you trust that person, but they're not willing to share anything for you, then you're still not a very good mentor, right? Or if you find yourself giving a lot of advice because you have a lot of experience and you're trying to share that with people who don't even trust you, then what people try to do is ignore you. They don't trust you. Yeah, you're saying all this stuff. It might be true, it might not be true, but I'm not even going to listen to something you're saying until you earn my trust, right? And then the last one is if you have trust and advice and you're sharing advice a lot, but you don't have any experience, then you're just a well-meaning amateur, right? You're just somebody out there that yeah, you trust me and you like to take my advice, so I'm going to tell you what to do with your life, or I'm going to tell you what to do with the ranch, but really have no experience with what you're doing. So none of those, you kind of have to have all three, the experience and trust, and be able to share that advice in the right times and the right ways. And so um, I want to share an experience with that in just a minute. But the overview of the people that I think we should be mentoring, or where are these leaders going to come from, I think fall in four categories. So I'm going to shift now to just the mindset of a ranch owner, manager, producer who's trying to attract people to come in and manage the ranch. The people that are going to come in are going to either be your children that are coming in, and I think uh, Jared just fell off, but he says that might happen with his internet and he'll jump back on. But they're going to be your own children. They're going to be employees that you have that might want to take over ownership. They're going to be outside professionals, somebody that's been ranching somewhere else and now might want to work with you or be a job, or what we might call hopeful or inexperienced. These might be students that are coming from an animal science program like ours that aren't going back to a ranch. They're looking for internship opportunities, ownership opportunities, or things like that. And so those are the four categories. So it's either going to be your own kids, or an employee that you have that you're going to bring into a succession plan, or somebody from the outside who's been managing other ranches, or you've tried to develop somebody who did not come from a ranching background and give them the skills in order for them to be successful. And as we think about being a mentor to those groups, a little interesting story I had as I was growing up. And welcome back, Jared. So this so we just went over those four categories of where these ranch managers might come from. I grew up, like I mentioned before, on a ranch that my great grandpa homesteaded, and by the time I kind of came on the scene old enough to be much help, I was kind of the youngest one of some of the grandkids and everything, and so my grandpa had started to lease out ground, sell out some cattle, and do some things like that. And so I found myself going to working around him quite a bit because he was a great mentor in the sense of a lot of experience and he had a lot of trust in him. And so he set me up with some of the local ranchers. I started working with them, learning things. Um, I'd go back, ask information from him. He was very progressive. He brought on early technologies in artificial insemination. He helped with early irrigation practices for rangelands and crops and things like that. And so just loaded with experience. And I started working for these other ranchers, started going out of state working, started getting my degrees, things like this. And when after I'd gotten married and he knew that I'd bought a house off the ranch, I remember my mom told me, he says, "Yeah, Grandpa was wondering if you were coming back and if you're going to live up on the ranch ground." And I thought to myself, I'm like, well, I hadn't even really considered that because I didn't know there was an opportunity there. And a lot of time, this is what we fall into. So he was loaded with advice he could have gave me, but he didn't share that advice of, hey, if you want to become part of this, I see opportunities. Because looking back, he probably saw a lot of opportunities that I was qualifying myself to be part of, but we never discussed them. And a lot of times in a family situation on a ranch, I see that we have a breakdown of either just expecting the child wants to be a part of the ranch or not explaining to the children how they can be part of the ranch, what the successor might look like, or what would be the compensation for a family if they were to come back. There's just not a roadmap in place. And so any of the children that are growing up, if they don't see roadmap there, they start to take their own roadmaps. And so this is an example of somebody who was extremely experienced, extremely high trust, but he was kind of more of a quiet observer and didn't give advice. And you guys, some ranch managers find him in that situation as well. But sometimes when you're looking at this group of children coming back into the ranch, uh, sometimes you haven't figured out the boundaries between being a parent and being a boss or a ranch manager or a mentor. And so you can't you can't help them progress into what we were talking about before of decision making and things like that. And so I have a lot of ideas on, and we can talk about that too in a minute of how do we help our own children come back. But this next group is employees. It's kind of the same way. If a rancher has a bunch of employees who uh, want to have more ownership in the ranch and want to on a greater role, and the owner of the ranch does not have family that's wanting to take it over, then we need to work that into the succession plan. But a lot of times the problem with that is the family either wants to sell out or they don't want to see outside the family people take ownership roles in there, and so it becomes hard to figure out a plan. And again, a lot of times they will not um, be able if the ranch owner can't create a good plan for what this might look like to take on the role, then that good employee who would make a good manager, he finds somewhere else that he's going to go. And then you look at the outside professionals who have all the skill in the world. They've been part of HR departments, they can come with a whole host of things, but they don't know the feel of the ranch. They don't know the exact management style. They don't know your vision. And so it takes a lot of onboarding to get them to be part of it. And then there's people like our students that how do they take on this role? Well, a lot of the ranchers look at them as well, they're inexperienced. I don't see them ever taking on a role. Maybe I'll invite them to do an internship program. Um, but really, that doesn't work out either because they're not big enough to offer an internship program. And so they don't even invite them to be part of it. And there's a lot of talent there that we're kind of missing out on. So those are the four groups that we're kind of looking at. And um, maybe I'll just ask you a question, Jared, on this, as because I'd like to dive into pros and cons of these groups and how we can help mentor each one. Which group do you think is set up to best become our next managers?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I mean, I think that any of those can thrive under the right mentorship when given the right experience and the right parameters. There's disadvantages with all of them, even the parent child, as I mentioned with my um, mentorship with my dad. It was a long distance deal, but sometimes when you're there working together, that can be very challenging also. So, um, yeah, yeah, I think any of them can work, and we've seen those work. Even taking somebody who's completely, not born on a ranch, doesn't have that experience, and being able to provide that experience, and then them move on and and start their own business and thrive.
Okay, yeah. Well, I'm under the belief that they all can work too. So In your situation, taking over the ranch, were you given a lot of opportunity before your dad left to make strategic decisions, even small ones?
I think he thought that I did. I could do all of the tactical things, but I never sat down beside him to even reconcile a checkbook, or I honestly had not signed a ranch check when he left.
Yeah,
And so, from the outside perspective, everything that you needed to do to manage a ranch from that perspective was great. From the business side, it was very much lacking.
good. So sometimes these students come in, we have these discussions all the time, and sometimes the dad wouldn't even allow them to fix the fence without proper supervision, or this is how many
Mhm.
wires we want, and you can't deviate, and this is the spacing, or this is where we do this. So those are kind of like you said, the day-to-day ranching decisions need to be made, and I think those need to be shared, and those are easier to be shared, but it's a lot harder for the parent to open up to the business side. And I find that there's a lot of reasons for this. A couple of them. The the parent doesn't want to show their lack of business savvy, right? If they don't know why they're making that decision, they just want, it's almost like fear. I'm gonna get, don't even ask me about that. I'm gonna get defensive on this because they don't really know why they're making the decision. They just have made it. Which is sad because as you're trying to be a mentor to the next generation, you need to walk them through the process of decision making, right? And if you're not doing that, then there's no way they can acquire that skill either. And another, so I don't want to open it because I don't like what you're going to see. The next one is maybe they are lacking in their ability on that side as well. So yeah, I'd open it up, but there's nothing there. And most ranch managers have areas of the ranch that they have a bigger preference in managing. So maybe their passion is in reproductive management, and they're at every bull sale. They're doing whatever they want to do with their AI programs or replacement heifers or something like that. The next one's all about nutrition, and they're doing all they can to figure out tracking the demands of that cow throughout the year and matching it and just refining it, and that's everything to do. But then they're not watching the reproduction very well. The next one's in the health, and they have health protocols, and the way they move their pastures, the way that they calve their cows is very structured from a health standpoint, health protocol, but they don't meet the feed needs as good as they could, which is interesting because that goes right along with health. And then the next one's like, all I love to do is study soil health and microorganisms in the soil and making sure that we can graze them in proper ways, but then they don't know how to sell their calves. And so they're weak in some of these areas, and they pass that on to their kids instead of just being really open with where their strengths are and where their strengths aren't. And this is that balance between okay, I'm your boss asking you to do some things. I'm also your parent, trying to bring you up, and I'm telling you I'm trying to help you learn how to make good decisions. But then I'm also trying to be your mentor to say, hey, you also need to learn to fail safely, right? Like I need to give you some autonomy, and I gave you the ability to go buy some bowls, and I stepped out of the decision making to see which ones you wanted to buy, and but maybe that first time I only let you do it for a certain set so we didn't have a bunch of dystocia problems come calving time. But maybe it's okay if you did have some because that's the better way of learning. And so turning over these big ones and just to kind of stop it and say, well, if you have a child that you want to take over the ranch, are you willing to invite him to go to your banker meeting? Right? I need to go talk to the banker about borrowing money or a cash flow program or look at our debt or look at what we're doing or the accountant. And are you willing to have him go with you and sit down right next to you and hear the whole conversation? And if you're not, why would that youth even want to be a part of that? Right? So those are some of those issues. I don't know if you have any comments on that or.
No, I think you've covered it really well. That's the way that ideally it should work, when we can let them learn and let them progressively take over decision making. That's one of the things that I remembered from Max Checkett's when he talked about in the business class that I took there, where you're now teaching years ago, was management is about making decisions. And to make those decisions, we need to have the right information. So you'll probably get into the difference between management and leadership, but
Yeah,
that's they're both necessary to be successful, right?
yeah, yeah. Yeah, 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 yeah. If you're a leader or manager, right? The Stephen Covey talks a lot about that, right? With a ladder on the right wall, or if you're picking your way through the jungle, a manager helps you to go up every rung of the ladder, and the leader makes sure the ladder is on the right wall, right? These are the big viewpoints that we're trying to help them see. Um, I think as we talk about that with other problems that a dad might have in mentoring their kids coming up is there's a lot of assumptions. You expect your kid to just know something, but you really haven't explained why, what the reason are for those decisions. And you say management's a lot about decision making, but usually we're trying to make a decision with insufficient information. Um, in education and classes, students are oftentimes just trained to learn what requirements are for an assignment, make sure they do all the requirements, and then submit an assignment. But in the real world, uh, you have all these variables that you're trying to make a decision from, and most of the time you don't have all the information, but yet you still have to make a decision. And a good mentor can walk that person through and say, at what point do we give up on trying to find more information and say, this is enough to make this decision? Or at what point are you willing to just risk not knowing 100% of the information and just move forward with the decision that you're going to make? So trained risk taking and optimism, things like that's what we're talking about. For the group that has some experience in coming in, like I said, those are a lot harder to mentor if it's just a family operation. If it's more of a corporate situation where you have a hierarchy of general managers and managers, it's easier to bring them in and onboard them into the philosophy and vision of the company. But when we're just an individual family ranch, that can be difficult because a lot of times it's hard to have the time. You don't have a structure set up for onboarding somebody to share vision, onboard them to the protocols that the ranch is currently doing, share the mission, share the values, all that kind of stuff. And so it can be hard to bring on somebody from that another ranching experience or background just because we're not set up to do that very well, like another company. And so if you are bringing somebody on, you got to pause, take time, very outline the business plan, outline the structure, what's important to you, outline the roles of who's in charge of what decisions, what autonomy am I willing to give to you, what choices do I need to make, what do you need to run by me. Everything's about clear communication to help them take over that ownership. Um, when we're looking at mentoring the group that's these students that are trying to come into the industry, I think as we look at mentoring that group, we could kind of put everybody into that group from the things that they need to know. Um, and let me just do kind of a case scenario here as well. If um, if there's a rancher who's looking for somebody to take over the ranch, so a succession plan needs to be in place, but we have nobody that's going to help do that. Say none of the family wants to be part of it. Um, and so they're looking for somebody to come on. One of the problems that I see with the ranch manager looking for somebody, ranch manager or owner, to bring them on is they do not clearly show the path towards ownership. They more want somebody to come on and work with them a while and feel them out and see if they fit the culture. And a lot of times they don't find that person who comes in and fits the culture because what happens is the the person is hired and through the hiring process, the owner shared with them, hey, one day I want to leave, so I'm looking for somebody to take over the ranch and and uh and I'll help you get set up for financing or something like that. That might have been the reasons that the person came to the ranch to start working. And after they've been there a while, the ranch owner, who did not have a clear exit plan or what it would look like to move from boss to kind of mentor and help with the transition, is still just acting as boss and has not allowed this new employee to start taking over managerial roles or anything like that. So pretty soon the new employee who came with the hope of maybe some ownership in the ranch or succession of the ranch, taking over, buying it, becoming a manager, working for the family that owns the ranch, being part of the trust, whatever that looks like, is now not seeing any progress in that. And so pretty soon he's still working at a low wage that the person brought him in on because they just wanted to try him out and they didn't know how good he'd be. And so now he says, well, I have responsibilities, especially if it was somebody who was somewhat stable with a family, because that's what the ranch manager would want to bring in is not just some young kid who can jump around. He wanted to bring in somebody who's, yeah, you've already, you've found your spouse. So you're probably you and your spouse both decided this might be a good opportunity and you both moved here to kind of take it over. But now they're like, hey, I got to provide for my family. It's not looking like this is progressing, and so I'll leave. And oftentimes when those if they were students or former students have been out in the workforce for a while, come back and tell me about that experience. They usually use words like, yeah, it just wasn't what I expected it to be, or that person wasn't completely honest with me. And I don't think that the ranch manager had an intent to be dishonest. The problem was he just didn't have a clear path of what it would look like to bring this person on. And then that person, the ranch manager tries to bring somebody else on, and the same thing starts to happen. And then those ranch managers, I get word back from them, they just struggle to find the right fit or the right guy. Well, the problem is not the right fit or the right guy is because they're not offering the right opportunity to attract the right guy. And I think that goes back on our current ranch managers of what their perceptions are. They came from a generation where they expected that the next generation should earn their spot in the ranch hierarchy, right? It's kind of like you got to pay your dues, you got to come in, you got to make this happen. But one of the problems is this new generation doesn't see things the same way. And we could say that's good or bad. It probably doesn't matter, but we need to adjust to be able to attract them. If you're hiring somebody just to try him out to become your next ranch manager and you're going to pay him hourly and you're going to give him a $20 an hour pay when that same person can walk down to full benefits flipping burgers at McDonald's for $20 an hour, it's kind of hard, especially if they don't see the future that you're willing to give them. And so it's kind of changed. Now, if that ranch manager has a program, well, this is how I bring him on, this is how I onboard, this is how I train him, this is how we go through, and it's working for you, then you shouldn't change what you're doing because it's working. But the group that I'm addressing is a group that's having a hard time attracting the right people to come in. You've got to at some point recognize what you're doing isn't attracting the people that you want. And so in my opinion, if you're trying to attract somebody to come and become a manager, take over your operation, or be one of your multiple managers, if you're a bigger outfit that can do that, is you need to have a very clear plan on what that role is. There's nothing worse than even whether it's a family operation or something else for that person to feel like, okay, I have this quality of life in mind. I want my spouse and I want X amount of kids to be able to afford a house, to be able to go on a vacation every once in a while, whatever that, and maybe the next person's quality of life is, we don't care. We could live in a camp trailer and work 7 days a week as long as we're with cows and horses, right? There's not a right or wrong there, but that person's going to have an idea about what their quality of life is. And then that quality of life has to be supported, right? We've got to be able to compensate the person for the quality of life that they want. And if you're courting or trying to bring on somebody who has a quality of life that is a lot higher than what you are able to provide, that needs to be explained right out in the beginning, right? If the wage that this person's expected to come in is at a certain yearly salary, but the ranch can only provide half of that, and you put all that time of mentoring and bringing them up, and okay, now you've been here for so many years, I'm going to turn over and really open the books and show you and start turning things over, and you find out that we're actually operating in the red and we got record high beef prices and there's no future here. That's not an honest way of presenting that, and we're not going to help that person become part of it if we haven't shared that information right from the start. Because the opposite is also true, whether it's a family ranch or you're just taking over ownership, is, hey, this is how profitable we are. and here's some areas we can improve. I'm not sure what to do. So if you want to come on, you've got to help me figure out how to increase the profitability of the ranch. And let's work on this together to show you what opportunities we can have to increase that profitability. And so now you're sharing with them ownership decisions. You can look at scenarios that the ranch might be able to do. And both parties are willing to change what they're doing in order for that goal. So that would look like something, do we need to acquire more ground? Do we need to acquire a herd? Do we need to change our strategic plan of when we buy and sell the cattle? Do we need to buy different types of cattle? Do we need to change our operating base, meaning location or years? And we bring this on to make it more profitable. But they're not willing to share that information with them and show them what that process would look like, then they're never going to see the clear path to take it over. And so that becomes a really important thing that I think the owners need to be able to take part of. So I don't know if you have thoughts on some of that stuff, Jared.
I wanted to ask you the question, if you've seen this work, what we've told our children, I'm the third generation, they'd be the fourth, but what we've asked of them is that because we have 9 children, we don't see it as prudent or wise or even a reality to divide the ranch 9 ways. And so what we've said is that we encourage them to go develop their own complementary enterprise and then bring that back to the ranch. So rather than dividing, we're multiplying. And everybody's a perfect parent until they have children. And in
Yep.
theory, that works great. In the practicality of that, we're finding maybe some struggles because there still is somewhat of a finite resource. But what are your thoughts about that way of bringing in the next generation where they bring their own living that doesn't detract from the ranch, but they get paid for the work that they do on the ranch?
Yeah. I think it's awesome where you're starting out with a clear expectation, right? And so you've got to share too what you're willing to support them in. You can't show favorites to kids or anything, so you got to be really open to say if you're doing your own enterprise, some of your ideas might be able to piggyback off of successful things that we're currently doing, and we can share some resources where the next kid it might be something, yeah, what you're proposing is totally different. We don't really have resources to support that, so you're either on your own or the resources that you need aren't tied up in assets in the ranch. This is going to be a capital investment that I might share with you if we go along. So I think being very clear and open with what you're doing with everybody will empower you. Um, I know of one operation that it's a large family operation, and they actually require their children to leave, whether some of them go off to school and get a degree, and it might be very specific in like business or finance or like what skill do I actually need, and they go and get that degree, and then the ranch would give them um, uh, an operation to manage themselves. So a smaller enterprise, and they had to prove that they could make sure that was profitable before they could come back onto the ranch. And this is a scenario where it's a large family operation. So we have, dad and then brothers become managers, and now brothers or daughters' kids are now wanting to be part of this enterprise. And what if you get a kid that's really not a very, very good fit? How do you say you don't have a role here? This is something that they decided they could do to make sure that everybody was evaluated correctly before they came back in. But the key is not saying I'm evaluating to see if you're good enough. The key is I'm providing ways for you to be successful. And if you can be successful under our mentoring and getting outside information to bring back for your enterprise to help out, and if we can help you be successful and you figure out you're a good fit, then yes, let's keep going together. And at the end of it, I think you before you work in that partnership, even with that family member, you know exactly what each other's bringing to the table and what that's going to look like. And the opposite's true. That person's like, yeah, I was successful in this, but I've also learned through this experience that I want to go a different direction in my life. And before you turned over uh, equity of the original ranch to him, and then he wants to leave, and now you got to figure out the equity. You know it right off the back. So I think that's powerful. So in your situation, I'd make sure that you are trying to help them be successful in all the different enterprises that are out there. Because just like you said before, you could get to a situation where you're over all your kids and now they can't even explore those enterprises without you giving the nod saying yes or no, don't make that decision, make this decision. That's poor advice from a mentor, right? The mentor is supposed to be given timely advice and measured advice to help that person grow. Because if you're trying to help them grow, it's not about only making a good decision. It's about having confidence to make a decision and then to correctly evaluate the results of that decision without feeling shame or being scared to make another one if it didn't go wrong. Your advice might be like, hey, I see you want to do this. How much risk are you wanting to take on that? Maybe instead of if you're developing at your own herd, this probably isn't an enterprise that your kids would go off and do different. This would probably be on the ranch. But if you're wanting to do something different with a herd, you might only take 10% of the herd to try this new thing out because you're willing to risk that much. And then if it goes completely south, how do you help them walk through that failure of the decision? The mindset that you help them walk through is what's setting them up for success. If it was a complete flop, and you shame them and you point out criticism, what might be to you is just teaching comes across as criticism. Now they don't even want to try again. And for sure, they don't want to try with you again. Right. But if you sit there and say, this is the same way that I operate too, I'm trying to be progressive and try new things. And this is how much risk I was willing to take. And it didn't work out. But that's why I only wanted to take that much risk. So we put it behind us. What did we learn? How did we overcome it? And boom, you're off to the next one. And then pretty soon, if that person's allowed to fail successfully like that a couple of times, they'll start seeing so many opportunities to be successful and move forward without that shame being part of it.
Yeah, that's excellent. I think everybody needs to be granted the opportunity to fail and to fail in a safe place. Um, One thing to point out here, and then I want to bring it back to what you see in this younger generation, but I think there's somebody on here that I had a call with, um, and I pointed out that if you are willing to learn marketing, and if you can bring to a ranch those skills of being able to connect with customers, there's a lot of desire now to start marketing direct to consumer. And in my generation and older, that's a tough skill to learn because it's so different than the type of networking and marketing that we grew up with. If a young person wants to get into production agriculture, one way that I could see that working is going and learning the skills of marketing, specifically internet marketing, being able to connect with customers and consumers. Because as producers, I think we do really well at what we do. We produce cattle. We can grow grass. We can grow hay. We're really good at production, but a lot of us really stink on the marketing side, and it's not
Yeah.
necessarily a skill that we love. So, do you feel like that is an opportunity for these young people who maybe didn't grow up in agriculture, but they want to have a part of it, or even they did? Maybe they want to go back to the ranch and they're like, well, there's not room. But if they were to start a D2C enterprise that they ran and the ranch raised the livestock, they bought them at market value and added value to it. Is that a viable scenario, Willie?
Oh, I think, yeah. And we have a lot of our old students that do that um, right now. So, so a scenario that you're looking at, um, and I've seen it be successful in several operations. Say the ranch, especially a ranch that might retain ownership all the way to the packer plant, right? So they raise it up and they're going to harvest it and send up. So they're already finishing the cattle. But they're selling it maybe on the grid or forward contracting. Maybe some of them are hedged, right? They're doing those type of marketing arms. But then you got somebody just like you're saying, well, hey, maybe you could add value to this product already. And so you've shared with one of your kids that this is our profit margins in this segment, meaning you've set it up in an enterprise that said we've raised these cows, the cow calf operation then sells to our backgrounding yard or our yearling operation or that segment, and that segment then sells to our feedlot, and then that they finish them out, and then the feedlot then sells it to the packing plant at this price. And anywhere in any of those segments, can you think of ways to add value? And you're saying, okay, well, what about the segment at the end of the feedlot before the packer plant? Can I add value there? And it's like, yeah, I think we can sell direct to consumer. Okay, well, why would that add value to it? Well, I think, right, we need to start with the consumer mindset first. Why would a consumer want to buy from you and not Walmart, right? Which in our market, these are kind of, um, we know a lot of those reasons right now, so we're not covering, but it's the idea of walking them through that step of saying, okay, well, here's the need that's out there, and here's how we can fill it. So let's say that there's a consumer. Now you're in Nevada. Let's say that consumer's in Central California. Or is it just going to be local, right? So you've got to identify who that consumer is, where they are, and how we're going to meet that need for them. And then well, if it's my neighbor down the road, I probably just asked them if they wanted to buy this cow and off I sold it, right? If it's local, maybe I did it on a Facebook ad or something like that. But if it's somebody I'm trying to reach across the nation, in a different state, let's just say in state line or across state line because of the regulations of shipping meat is going to come into that. But and this is, and you're walking them through this. Okay, well, if you're going to go to that market, all right, you can sell to that market at this price, and therefore this is the income you're going to have. And so it looks like, as opposed to us selling it to the packer like we've been doing, you can sell direct to consumer, make a 20% increase on that. At what cost? Okay, well, I've got to learn my marketing. I've got to learn to put an online store together to do orders and to promote it, right? Okay, well, how can I set myself apart from somebody else? So I think this is what you're talking about. Um, all right. Well, I've learned how to rotate cattle and select good bulls and treat sick cows, and I have the skill of riding my horse to doctor. These are all things, but now I've got to figure out how do I tell my story to a Californian, right? How do I help them want to have a desire to buy my product? And this is an entirely different skill set. And to your point, somebody that didn't grow up on the ranch, they might be able to learn these skills even faster because they don't have to change bad habits or different paradigms or different ways of looking at things. They can just adopt it really quick. But now their education's in digital marketing, maybe graphic design. Maybe they even start coding things or taking pictures, and they can do this at all different levels. Maybe it's really not that much. Maybe it's just a tiny bit. Or maybe I just learned how to manage it well and I learned how to go hire out somebody else to do those skills for me. And I think as a mentor, you're helping them say, hey, maybe you should see how much that's going to cost for this other person to do the branding for you because they're really good at it and you got a steep learning curve but you're really good at managing or being able to tell the story. So let them do the brand for you. You go get the video content that's out there, and then maybe you have to learn some editing skills, or maybe you hire an editor. And how do I evaluate these decisions? I think that becomes the learning. And even if you get to the end of that process, this is where I think it's really important. If you get to the end of that whole process and you'd predicted that you're going to have a 20% increase in income, just throwing that number out there, and it's only 2% or 5%, you decide, was that really worth it or not? And even if it wasn't as good as you hoped it was, and you decide to change and go do something else, they can still learn so much confidence and skill from that. And even if you didn't lose money on it, that'd be the best case scenario. You even broke even. Well, that's very valuable learning costs of education. And now they can go on. And I've seen even if they fail at one or two things, again, how much you might have only said, all right, I'll let you do 30 head, or I'll let you do 5% of my fats to be able to do that, right? And you do the same thing with selling weaned calves, right? It doesn't matter at what stage you're doing it. And you might even say, well, maybe our bread and butter market is selling calves to people that are trying to put them out on their own pastures and grow them up for the summer. And so now this would affect, well, let's take this group and change our calving times because we want to be this way at the first of the summer when they're putting it out on pasture. And so let's see if we can go after that market. But I'm talking a lot about the specifics, but the most important thing is being intentional on teaching the process and how to evaluate the consequences of decisions, and there's ways to overcome the obstacles that are in front of them.
Yeah. Yeah, well said. Thanks for covering that. That's great. Um, with the students that you come through your classes, what are their needs and what are their wants? Help us
Yeah.
as this older generation, which I put myself in that, you know. My oldest son is 27, and so I just turned 50. Um, help us to understand what they need and what they want.
Yeah. Good. And I'll speak from the demographics that here is at the university that I'm at. We have about 400 students in our program. A lot of those are the majority of them are in animal science program, but they're not coming from production agriculture. Now, some of them get introduced to it while they're here, and they develop a love for it, so they want to go into it. But we have some that want to go become veterinarians, and so they're on the vet route. We have some that are going more what we call companion animals. So maybe they're in animals, but not ones that we eat, right? They're going to help them. So then the rest of this demographic usually falls under I want to be in food production agriculture, but only for my family or a small hobby farm or a side business to support something else that's going on. And then we get the smaller percentage that want to go in and be managers, owners, producers within this. And this is the smaller group that you're talking about. Now, if they came to us loaded with skill, this is something that's important to know, I think, from you guys, is that if I have a student that has some pretty high skill levels and is a very good critical thinker, and they get to the end of they've done an internship that was easy for them to get because they're so loaded with skill and background, and maybe they do two internships with large operations, when it comes time for them to graduate and get a job, they're very easy to place. Everybody wants them, right? Very easy. And then we have the next student who really wanted to come in here and maybe they have all the talent in the world, but they don't have much skill or background. Very smart, very capable. And what I mean by skill or background is maybe they can't ride a horse very well. And that's like, well, what does that really matter at the end of the scheme of things? But the problem is that student's not even able to get an internship because an internship provider is looking at, hey, I'm comparing student A and student B, and they're pretty equal, but this one can ride a horse, and that takes away my risk, right? And so the internship operator or the ranch owner says, well, I'm not going to bring him in to give him the skill. So here's this talent that just stays away because nobody's given them that opportunity. And what to your question, what I think you could help this next generation that doesn't come from high skill is how can I mentor them? And I'll have this group come to me and they'll be like, where can I get this experience? I don't even need to get paid. I just need some experience. But somebody like you're like, well, I don't have time to help you. And I can't say, hey, go get on that horse and ride up that canyon to bring the cows in today because you might die out there and I'm liable because I don't know what's going to happen or I've got to pair you up. But if the ranchers are really trying to help this next generation, there's going to have to be um, some altruism happen to where they're just willing to give up some time, talents, and energy to kind of give back to them. And I think that they can do it at different levels. It might just be coming and visiting with them and talking, but they need that skill. They need to come out. And so these bigger ranches, we have sometimes in the industry we say, oh, we're selling out the family ranches to corporations. But the part of the reason is these corporations can provide these opportunities to this next generation so much easier than a lot of the family ranches can. I mean, the family ranches provides a lot of opportunity for the family to grow up in and to give that, but for somebody outside the family, there's not. Um, like if you these other operations, we have a lot of them come to recruit the students, and they'll have 4 or 5 internships open throughout the year, and they're able to take one or two of very low skill set and give them an opportunity because they have the other ones with higher skill sets. And these bigger corporations are starting to seek out the student as a form of how they hire, right? So instead of putting time into a hiring process, they're putting time into an internship development program and then pulling their hires out of that. And the mindset of these producers is I'm going to give to them even if I'm not going to hire them. And I'm all right giving of my time. I'm all right opening books and sharing a lot of information with this person because I've learned if I do that, I can really weed out who really is a good fit for our mission, our organization, and for that position that I need. They're not going from a mind of scarcity saying everybody should want to work for me and I'm going to be really slow to give compensation in money, monetary value, or compensation in um, my knowledge back to them. I'm going to freely give and I'm going to raise them all up, even if they go work for somebody else and I come back. And under that mindset, what they find is maybe they even go work for somebody else. And in 5 years, they apply back to work for you. And now you got somebody who already understands your mission, you have good rapport with, and comes with 5 years of external experience to bring to your management team and help you. So then the question is, how does somebody who's just, well, I don't have a big corporation, I don't have all this opportunity, what can I give? What can I share? And I think sometimes it just might be like, hey, we've heard that you guys need some opportunity. Why don't you come help us brand? Or we're gathering in the fall, or we just weaned and we're going to be checking for sick calves for the next 2 weeks. Just come and spend a little bit of time and help out. But I don't know if that kind of addresses because I see the reasons why some people can offer those opportunities, but I also see a lot of scarcity mindset that they don't want to offer or they don't want to share money or knowledge with the next generation.
Yeah, that's a that's a good answer. I think we need to be open and give them those opportunities in a safe place. Jacob asked a good question here. Jacob, do you want to unmute and go ahead and ask that so it's just on the recording?
So you were talking about getting the older generation to change and kind of allow the younger generation to come in and try some new things. So how do we start those conversations with the current ranch managers, current owners who maybe aren't as open to trying those new things just based on their life experiences and their expectations, and how do we make them feel comfortable doing that?
Super good question. Yeah. What are your thoughts, Willie? And then I'll chime in.
Oh, that's good. You get more time to ponder. Uh, question, Jacob, and hopefully you're doing good. Um, so the way that I think about this is I try to break it down to a principled approach, meaning my decisions are based off of principles regardless of the application. So when you say these older ranch managers, that's such a broad thing. Like, is this an older an older manager who has nobody to leave the ranch to, and he's out there trying to find somebody to leave the ranch to? That's one paradigm. The other one's somebody who has a lot of capital and assets, and you're just like, he could provide a lot of opportunity to me. I want to approach him with a business idea and see if he wants to partner. Or it's somebody that's saying, hey, I see that you're coming along. I want to work my way up into your company and maybe take some equity or ownership eventually one day, right? So this is what I mean. There could be so many applications. So a principle. So this is the principle is you need to find what their pain point is. What's something that they're trying to solve and are unable to? And you need to decide, can I solve this pain point to them? So the person that's trying to find somebody to leave it to, hey, here I am. But you can't just say, here I am. You've got to say, I see that you don't have somebody to leave the ranch to. But more importantly, why don't you have somebody leave the ranch to? What are you looking for? It's like, well, I want somebody who continue to take care of the land like I'm taking care of. I want somebody to continue this tradition and this vision and this mission that I am, and this is what it looks like to me. And now you go, because you asked, how do I approach this person? Well, now you know what he's looking for. So now you can go honestly share how you feel you could meet those needs or solve those pain points for him. And so you can't just sometimes we want to say, here I am, choose me. And hey, can you hire me? Can you hire me? Can you help me? Can you help me? And the opposite of that is saying, hey, I need to learn more about you to see if this is even going to work. I need to learn what you're struggling with, what you're trying to solve, and I want to come in and show you how I can help you with that situation. Right. And maybe it's just even a more wealthy person that's like, hey, I have all this land and I'm trying to figure out what to do with it. And you come in with a solid business plan to say, look, I can manage this land in a very responsive and regenerative way Do you see how I can do this? And it's not going to come at a cost to you, right? Some of them. So anyway, there's lots of opportunity depending on the person that you're trying to approach. Is, does that make sense, Jacob? Or
That was a really good principle. I actually have not done that. I think you know my situation. It's more family based control aspect, but I actually don't know what his pain points are, and I've never asked. So
yep.
I'll see if he'll open up to me about that.
Yep. And that goes back into what we were saying earlier with one of the problems that a family organization has is expectations, right? Um, you have expectations of what you think should happen. He has his, but you guys don't even know what each other's are. And so neither one of you can solve the conversation because you're not having the conversation, right? And as you say, okay, well, let me learn how to communicate well. Let me ask you some very specific questions. The opposite of that is you just pushing yourself on him. Hey, you need to make these decisions. You need to allow me to do this. You need to do this. You need to, and that doesn't help at all. It needs to go the opposite direction is, hey, what are you trying to do here? What's our goal? What's our mission? And how do I fit in this?
Perfect. Thank you.
And Jared
Yeah.
will give you better advice now.
No, I think that's great. And then Brandon, if you want to ask your question, I think that's a good one also. But amen. I think, yeah, Willie described that really well. Like, once you know what that older generation, we'll just call them older generation, whatever that might be, once you know what they want, and then you help them solve that need, you do your due diligence and you come to them with, hey, I've thought this through. That's not going to speak to everybody because some people have big egos. Some people have to swallow pride. Some people don't want to give it up. And so there has to be a desire there. But I know I've had two different people that have approached me that say, hey, we don't have successors. Can you help me? I tell them I'm not a dating service, but but yeah, absolutely. We'll do our best to find somebody who fits, um, because we want to ensure that operation stays within a family operated environment if we can. I mean, there's nothing wrong if they want to sell out and do something else, but their desire is that they find somebody who carries on a legacy. Um, so learn the skills that you need to step in and be that type of manager, and really get to know yourself. Like, what what are my unique skills? What are my gifts? What are my talents? What are my abilities? Where can I shine and thrive? So, Brandon, do you want to ask your question? Oh, maybe he might have jumped off. So I'll read
Yeah.
it for him. So he says, trying to lease. How do you approach trying to lease from a landowner who's nervous about different types of land/livestock management, things they may not be familiar with? So they're reluctant to lease their land for, quote, regenerative practices.
Yeah, well, I'll take a stab at it. I think the same type of thing is we need to understand really what's being asked here. It's probably not that the manager is not willing to try different things. It's probably that he doesn't trust you and being able to do those things, right? And I know those go hand in hand, meaning that manager probably doesn't believe in the different type of livestock because he hasn't seen success with them, or he doesn't believe what he's seeing other people who are being successful, that what they're doing could work on his operation, right? And if you're approaching that landowner saying, hey, down the road or another state or another part of the country, this is what they're doing and this is how good it is and it's amazing and you should be doing it. And that landowner usually says, well, yeah, that worked for them, but it doesn't work here, which is a true principle, right? Just because one operation is doing it doesn't mean that the other operation can apply it. So, in my opinion, what you need to do when you approach something like that, again, is to be upfront and honest. Now, you're probably coming from a standpoint where you're not one of those outside professionals, meaning you haven't been running a ranch using these principles already to where you have a track record saying, do you see how I've done this and how successful I am? Because if you did that, then that's a different conversation. But you might believe in these principles and you're trying to learn them and you're trying to do them. And now you have an opportunity where you're trying to pitch it to this new landowner, or, hey, can you lease me land to practice this? Because, I mean, if you're leasing land, maybe it's a crop share type scenario or something like that. So now So my advice to you in that situation is be very clear on your plan that you've developed. So when you say this livestock management is what you have written there, or regenerative practices, you got to outline exactly what that is, what your expectations of how they should work, and your implementation of that in that protocol. Meaning, all right, this is the principle. I've seen it work in this situation on this ranch, this situation on this ranch. This person claims it on this ranch. I see that you have similar soil type, climate, breeds of cattle, and I think this will work here. What I'm suggesting is that we take this and do X, Y, and Z. This is my plan for you. And maybe it's a small amount of animal, just like we've talked about when you're doing it with your family. Maybe it's a small percent of the operation. If the owner already owns the cattle and owns the land, if they just own the land resource and you're bringing the cattle on, then it is a little bit different conversation. But the principle of what I'm suggesting is you're very and probably before you even do that, you're very clear on what his concerns are about the different land, the different livestock, and the different management practices according to the question. So make sure that you're addressing his actual concerns, but you can't just say, well, it's worked for them. I'm going to do that. Let me have a try. Okay, well, tell me exactly how you're going to implement this. Tell me each step before I agree to it. And the process of figuring out those steps would probably um, help answer all those questions as you go along. So,
Yeah, really, really cool. I would just add to that, get involved with some communities. There's some great communities on Facebook, and put it out there like, hey, this is what I want to do. You might find that there are people outside of your region, if you're willing to move and expand your region, where you can go and try things. And so don't get boxed in and think, well, I grew up in the West, so I need to stay out here in the West. There's a lot of value. I did an internship in Florida, and I'm really grateful that I could do that and just see a completely different way of raising cattle.
yeah,
So,
yeah,
um,
100%.
Art, if from Canada, if you want to share your perspective as that generation, you have a ton of wisdom. But I want to ask if you give it some thought, Art. If you'd like to share, we'd love to hear from you. Willie, I want to ask. Um, well, I'll just ask a question. So this younger generation, there are some challenges that we didn't face in our generation. Depression, suicide. There's some real things that maybe we can't completely relate to, but I know my family's not immune from that. Um, as far as we try to eat healthy, we try to do all the right things, and still, depression is part of our family. How does that play into this younger generation's ability to um, thrive in a ranch environment, and how can we support that and work with that?
That's a very, very good question.
And I'm sorry to spring that one on you. It's just I um I've had a son that had to come home from a mission because of depression. My daughter's doing a service mission because of depression, anxiety tendencies, and so it hits close to home.
Yeah,
And they still are very capable. They're still, my son's married, thriving, has a really, really good job now. But it for whatever reasons, and that's outside of the subject of what we need to talk about here. That is, one of the plagues of our time of dealing with these things. And so I'm sure you probably see it. I have a friend who said, the counselors there at the school or you teach are just booked out, because of those issues. Like they're hiring more counselors. That's a big deal. So, uh, yeah, any thoughts of how we can help this younger generation and let them realize that, hey, we don't blame you. This is not something, I get it. You don't just say, well, just buck up and get to work. It's all in your head. I know that doesn't work. So
yeah, yeah. Well, and thanks for sharing your family's experiences. I mean, I've been affected by it as well, and it's very real. I don't think I could say something that is a blanket statement to answer that by any means. Um, but one thing that I will say is I think one of the greatest things that helps them is to walk with them. Um, and just like you said, you can't shame them. You can't say you should, and you can't say just buck up and do all this, right? I think the best way, and what I mean by walk with them, is acknowledge that what they're feeling and what they're experiencing is real.
Mm-hmm.
It's okay to feel and experience those things, and that we don't want to numb them out. We want to listen to what they're telling us. And so walking through them, identifying those, and it seems like once somebody has accepted that in the sense of, I'm okay to have these feelings, then they can start looking for ways to change the feelings if they want to. It's okay to feel down. It's okay to have these feelings. But if you also want to have some happy feelings, that's okay too. And these are some ways to get there. And in context of our conversation tonight and mentoring this younger generation, I think the best way to do is walk with them and show them how to do it. Just like we're talking about with your family, they need to go do another enterprise and bring it on. You could just say, well, good luck. Come back to me when you've mastered your enterprise, and my all-knowing hand will wave, and I'll let you come back in, and we'll be all together. It's almost setting them up for failure. But
Yeah.
if during that process you're walking with them, you're not controlling them, you're not violating agency principles, you're enhancing their ability to act for themselves by providing choices in front of them that aren't so far out there they feel immobilized to reach for. They can see a choice, they can take the choice, they can recognize the consequence of that choice. Man, that was good. I was able to do that, and off you move on. And this can fit so well into what we're talking about, what we're trying to do. If it's your employee, not even your family member, so somebody you hired by an hourly wage because you need a little extra help fixing fence, you can do that exact same thing with them, and just help be a mentor and help them understand that they bring value, that what they're doing is meaningful, that they're connected to you, that they're connected even better in our industry to the land and animals. We can connect them to life, right? That's all around us. And they start to see true principles of how life interacts with each other. And they can see true principles in seasons, from the grasses going dormant to living, to animals
Mhm.
going through birth and death. And these are all things that you can walk with them through and point out and see that this is a normal thing of life. I think one of the reasons of increased um, depression rates is disconnection from this, whether we're just living online or we've isolated ourselves. This depression, suicide thrives in isolation.
Mm.
And so that's why I'm saying you don't need to have some amazing skill, just walk with them.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for covering that. That's great. I want to make sure that this gets on the recording. We'll put in the chat. There's a great group of younger cowboys called the Outside Circle that have organized forums in Elko to discuss mental health and ranching. We definitely need those conversations to feel connected. So thanks, Will. That's one that I wasn't aware of. On our podcast, I had three fellow ranchers that were brave that shared their own struggles with depression and alcoholism. Um, and they were willing to do that because they knew that they needed help, and so we were willing to reach out, and offer that hey, you might feel like you're all alone, but there's a lot of us that have been through that. So know that you're never alone, that you can reach out. There's going to be somebody within your circle that has answers for you. So this has been a great discussion. We appreciate you being part of this, Willie, and it's needed. It's needed. I think that we, as stewards of the land, we have a responsibility to care for the land and livestock that God's entrusted us with. And we've been given knowledge. We have that responsibility to share it with others. So if this is your first time to one of the Ag Steward events, we do these twice a month. We also do more extended events, summits, and workshops and classes as well. So tune in. You can check out what we do on YouTube. It's the Profitable Ag Steward. On the podcast channel, it's the Profitable Steward. And just love to get some final thoughts from you, Willie, to kind of wrap things up here.
Yeah. Yeah, I think we've just scratched the surface on this topic, and I hope that people that listen probably are thinking, well, we could have do this, and this is a problem. I hope it just kind of makes people think there's so many opportunities we have to become mentors. And I also don't want somebody to think, especially if you're coming from just you're a rancher, you're a family rancher, you don't have opportunities for internships or to bring on a lot of outside youth and mentor them and help them to grow, that there's nothing you can do. So I just want to throw this out there. When we travel around with our students, um, we try to do a lot of farm visits, and those managers become amazing mentors to our student. I say we're gonna go look at this ranch, you're gonna see different country, you're gonna see different animals, you're gonna see all this, but most important, you're gonna meet somebody that's gonna share with you some amazing perspectives that are gonna change your life. And it's the people that we're gonna meet that's more important than just going and seeing the ranch. Um, Now, for those that don't even, obviously we're not coming down to your place in Nevada because we can't fit that into our curriculum. We're a little bit closer. But when we travel to like our Cattlemen Association meetings or any of our Farm Bureau meetings or just BQA trainings where you might see a group of students, or it doesn't even need to be students, a person that's needing mentored. I don't know how to say that. We have a lot of people that recognize our students or recognize that, and they walk up and they start a conversation with me. And when we head home from these events, that they talk so much about that. Oh, so and so is so nice. He's got this ranch up here. He talked to me about this. Like that inspires them. That makes them want to be like them. That makes them see what the people are like that are managing the ranches and doing those things. And so you don't need to do something big. You just need to talk to them. If you see somebody at the feed store that's young, stop and talk to them and show them that, hey, not every rancher's grumpy and worried about the market crashing, and, walk with them. So,
Yeah, well said. Well said. I appreciate that. I think we have that as part of our duty to steward this younger generation, and that's really the test of a regenerative ranch is, can it pass to the next generation, ranch or farm?
yeah,
We use the term regenerational, and part of being regenerative is that we can bring that next generation in. And to be able to do that, we need to have some things in place. Needs to be profitable. I think we need to adopt what are regenerative practices. We can't continue to degrade the land base and expect that it will last for generations. We need to step into leadership, not just focus solely on management and production, but truly make sure we're doing the right things and we're doing the right things well. And so the mentoring part, I love that you brought that in. That's a big part of what we do. I consider myself more of a mentor than a coach because I may not be able to tell somebody through my experience, hey, this is how you raise the best corn crop in the world, because that's outside my context. I've never done it. But as a mentor, I can explain the principles of, hey, here's what you need to know. On a personal level, here's the basic principles that when applied, the soil and those things that you steward will respond to. So,
yeah.
Very good. Yeah, we can keep going here, but did you have another thought?
You just prompted me, and I'll say this, and then whatever you want to do. I do some leadership trainings too, and one thing that we do, I love using the model of a horse, and we use the horse to give us feedback because we have these perceptions of what reality is, and we act on those perceptions, and we try to get the environment around us to respond correctly according to our assumptions or our perspectives. And when we work with the horse, if we're listening to the horse, it gives us immediate feedback on what we're doing is right or wrong. And this becomes a good thing of leadership is is that we're willing to change when we receive feedback that gives us a course correction. And as you're talking, see, that's a principle-based thing, and I'm trying not to get into an hour-long discussion of it, but you're saying the exact same thing with the land. You act within these principles, you see how the land responds to you, and then you either choose to follow what it's telling you or to buck up and resist it, right?
Yeah.
If your management practices are giving you the results that you want, it's a good management practice. If your practices aren't, then you need to change. You need to be willing to change quickly and not, and, let down your pride and say, oh, I see this decision resulted in this consequence, therefore I'm going to do something different. And I think that's the skill of a leader that we're trying to create and model, right? To be quick to say, here's where I'm receiving um, my indicators to change or to modify my course. And that goes into our managers that are trying to hire people too. If nobody's sticking around your operation or you can't attract any good helpers, maybe you need to look at what you're offering and what you're putting out there because your system's not working to attract what you want. So therefore the system might be wrong. It might not be all these dumb kids of the next generation. Um, Even if you think that's the truth, it's still not giving you the result you want, which is somebody to
Yeah.
help you. So,
Yeah. Yeah. Well said. So yeah, to answer your question, Will, is there value in working with larger mentoring organizations like the Quivira Coalition, Young Agrarians Program? Absolutely. Great organization. I think we need more of that. I love Quivira is a great proponent of regenerative agriculture, and I think that they're a good fit. The Savory Institute has some opportunities within it as well. There's other programs that are out there, and certainly, BYU Idaho is a great opportunity as well. So, did you want to give a comment, Art? You're back on camera now.
Jared, what a topic you and Will are working on here tonight, because this is just so critical and important. But one thing I'm thinking about is, the value of what we have now. And we didn't talk very much about, passing on the actual value. We're talking about passing on mentorship, but, the baby boomer generation is going to pass on the most wealth of any generation in all of history. And I think we need to look at this, what we're going to do with this wealth that we didn't really do anything to earn, because we just lived and the price of everything went up. So, as stewards of what we have, and you and I know that we don't own a blinking thing. We know who owns it all. We have to be very careful who we're passing it on to. You can pass it on and they can filter down the drain really quick. But at the same time, we have to give them a chance because somebody gave us a chance. And this incredible value that everything is worth now, we can't look at that, I don't think, in a big way. I know we're supposed to be good stewards of what the good Lord has given us, and we don't want to see it squandered, but at the same time, this is a real challenge of how we get ownership back of the next generation into this. So, we're going to have to give up some of it, Jared. There's no question about that in my mind. We're going to have to give up some of this value, and because none of us are going to take too much with us. And it's something that, that my wife and I have spent a lot of time praying about, and, we have 9 children also, but there's only room here for one, and one came home, and we're giving him a chance, and he's brought a new enterprise into the business, but I have to give him a pile of rope to do his thing. Because, Jared, did I raise him very well or not? Guess we're going to find out.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing, Art. I really appreciate your perspective from somebody a little bit older than us who's doing it successfully. Yeah, the one thing that came to mind from what you said, Art, is we focus a lot on the value that we're going to transfer to the next generation, the assets, the land, the livestock, the equipment, the bank accounts. What is eternal is values. And if we can transfer those values that helped us to create wealth and help the prior generation to create wealth, those are the things that are going to be even more important than the value of the assets. And so that's why I appreciate the values that we've been taught from folks like Art. And I think, Willie, you're trying to instill that in your students as well, that beyond just being good managers, there are principles. I can tell very much from the way you speak that you're principle based and you're bringing everything back to how does this tie back to truth? And that truth comes from one source. And then that will help dictate the day-to-day decisions that we make. So,
Well said. Yep.
yep. Well, good, you guys. Well, this has been an awesome discussion. We appreciate you being part of this, Willie, and I think we should do it again sometime. And just, there's a need. Resources, anything else that we haven't talked about as far as resources, I'll give a plug for, the Ranching for Profit does a great short course for the younger generation at Ag Steward. We don't directly have a course for the younger generation, but our colleague William DeMille does, and a couple of your students are enrolled in that, Willie, this summer, and that's on our ranch.
Oh, great.
And what are you aware of more like bridging the hands-on with maybe the experience with the education?
Yeah. Well, all these groups that you've already mentioned, I'd
Okay.
stand behind that. And one thing to kind of mesh with that as people are trying to do that. I'm all for mentoring and being in any part of a group because it challenges your thinking and gives you good thoughts. Um, I try to remind the students that when you're a ranch manager, you're always part of a team, even if you are wearing all the hats on the ranch. Because if you, for example, you go to buy vaccines, you're gonna you're gonna collaborate with your veterinarian. When you go and buy your feed supplements, your minerals or what, you're going to collaborate with a nutritionalist. When you go to buy a bull or go to buy semen, you're collaborating with the reproduction specialist, whether they're raising the seed stock or they're the AI person. Whether you're going to do your taxes, now you got an accountant that has professional skills. If you go to the banker, you got somebody who's trained at looking at business plans. And so I think in our day-to-day operations, we need to understand we're part of multiple groups at the same time, and you're not isolated. These guys will help you make all sorts of decisions. But then if you're trying to improve and none of those people are helping you, you need to go find somebody who has those thoughts. And I think that's one of the things that you guys are very strong on on bringing in
Yeah.
is okay, well, how do we change just what everybody else is kind of doing, and how do we expand that?
Yeah, that's our goal. That is absolutely our goal. Respect the traditions that we've grown up with, the values that we've been taught, but also recognize that our predecessors did the best that they could with the knowledge that they had. And sometimes the results were good and sometimes they weren't. They were degenerative in some of the practices that they adopted. And so it's our duty to learn from what they did, the good and the bad, and to make the adjustments necessary. So we'll wrap it up. Thanks everybody for being part of this discussion here tonight. We encourage you to jump on the podcast and listen to it and share it with those that may not have been here that you feel like would benefit from it. And we hope to see you on a call here at one of the future events. If you've registered for this, you'll get additional information for the next ones coming up. So thanks, Willie. Appreciate you being part of this.
Thank you, and thanks for those that asked questions. It was great.